Good evening and welcome to a brand new episode of Chit Chat with Sanam. Thank you so much for being here. Today I have such a special program planned. Before we get into that, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who's been so supportive of the show. Today we are doing something a little bit different. You know, we try and change it up from time to time. It's important to stay relevant and to be here for all of you, the lovely audience that's here to watch. So today, for those who maybe aren't aware, it is actually the month of mental health awareness. So the following two episodes of Chit Chat with Sanam is going to be dedicated to that awareness. It is a movement that is very close to my heart and very dear to me. I myself struggle with some mental health issues from time to time, stress, anxiety, depression, all sorts of things. I mean, you know, unfortunately life is just that way, that you can't predict what's going to happen next, and it does throw us off at times. So for myself, and I do feel that there's a lot of people that can really benefit from growing this awareness and destigmatizing and understanding what exactly it means to look into your mental health. I think it's very important to cover this as a topic. So this week as well as next week, I'm going to be delving into mental health awareness, and I'm going to be speaking around a lot of topics that are related to that. So we're going to steer clear from the entertainment side and the creatives, you know, and all of those fun and entertaining things. We're going to be doing this for the next two episodes, but we will be back to our usual routine of fun and frolic and all things creative and colorful from next month. So for now, I think just sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. Please do participate. It really is very warmly welcome, and I think it's all about discussion and conversation. So please get involved, send your comments through, participate if you can. If you want to share it, you're more than welcome. In fact, I would love for you to actually share it with your friends and to grow the awareness. That's what it's all about today. So I am going to introduce my first artist. She is an artist because she's just so creative in so many different ways. But before I do that, I have a panel of two guests today, and they both have very, very interesting stories, so much of information to share with all of you. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my first guest for today, and that is Nirvashni Govender. My apologies. She's a wonderful lady who is a hypnotherapist as well as a shaman. She's also an NLP master practitioner and is very much involved in alternative healing. She's also the co-founder of a wonderful company called Max, and I'm going to add her to the conversation and get to know her a little bit more and get the discussion going in terms of what she is going to present in terms of today's theme and topic. Thank you so much for joining, everybody.
Hey, you.
Hi, how are you?
Good and you.
I'm a little bit cold, but I'm okay. I think I'm surviving.
So it is fun and frolic, and I was listening to your introduction, and you know, everybody says that mental health is or they think mental health is such a serious arena. And given we're actually talking about it in a platform where we're talking about the enjoyment of life, fun, frolic, as you were talking, I thought to myself, do I need to really keep this serious? Or can we actually talk about mental health and the topic that we're discussing today, stress, as something that is a normal part of life in these times, and not something that's either a stigma or a serious thing, or we cannot deal with it? If we think about it as a normal part of life that is happening at the moment, then it's a focus that we place as much as we wake up in the morning and we have our breakfast. Or we actually decide, today I'm going to wear that colored dress instead of a gray dress. So if we look at it from that perspective, maybe mental health then doesn't become such a hectic issue for people to deal with. I don't know how you feel about it.
I completely agree. I think there's so much of taboo and stigma attached to it, and it's seen as this dark, gray, gloomy topic that, oh no, it's stressful. But you know what? It's just like fitness. You know, you take care of your body. If we were speaking about yoga, we'd be like, hey, put your hands up and now breathe in. And you know, we'd be all excited about it. And I think we should have the same attitude towards our mental health, because that is, you want to strive for happiness
Yeah,
and this carefree attitude. So absolutely, make it as fun as we can.
exactly. So what happens like when we actually, so if we decide we're not having a social life, right? And we decide that we don't want to go out and we don't want to do stuff, then we don't have fun in life. And what we do is we push ourselves to go out. It's the same thing here. If we don't actually pay attention to our thoughts, we don't pay attention to what we're doing every day, the things that we worry about, then it's going to cause something in our lives. And it's all about just pulling ourselves back. So I like to use the term, bring yourself towards yourself and just look at, okay, what is going on and what are the simple things I can do to get out of it or to deal with this. So that being said, let's deal with this in a much more, it's an everyday life kind of thing. And let's see what are the fun things we can do to actually get out of it, right? And
But
that's where I make this series a little more different to every other series.
sorry, before we get into all of those things, because I know you're like bursting with information and you're just this powerhouse of knowledge, and I love it because you have so much to offer. In fact, I hope I can do justice just in this one session. But before we get into that, I want to know for myself and obviously for everybody who's watching, what exactly is an NLP master practitioner?
Oh, okay, cool. So let's take one step back. I do have varied things that I've done. And Bodymax is made up of myself and my husband that actually started up a company that decided to be into self-development. We come from a corporate background and we come from a very spiritual background. So born Hindu, became more universal, got into alternative therapy, studied psychology up until the honors level, and then decided to go out there into the real world and start working in corporate and doing IT. So that why I'm telling you that is I understand people on many different levels, not just in the therapy world, in the working world, in the emotional world, in the soul world. So from there, how I started to get back into wanting to help people on a more emotional level is when I started neuro-linguistics programming. And neuro-linguistics programming is literally using and understanding your language that tells you a lot about who you are, what you believe in, what are your positive beliefs, what are your negative beliefs. It's about understanding the way your brain is wired, and we can actually rewire our brain out of anxiety, depression, stress responses that are chronic. So it's utilizing and understanding your brain. And the programming part of it is if a computer is modeled according to our brain, and we can program a computer, we can reprogram the way our brain thinks. So, for example, if I keep on thinking that dog is dangerous, and I do a couple of processes to actually understand what dogs are about, and I do a little bit activities, as in like I look at a dog from behind a screen, or eventually I'll watch somebody playing with a dog, or the next day I'll watch a dog movie. I start to reprogram my brain to actually realize dogs are actually not dangerous, and I can actually be able to be near a dog, pet a dog, and experience the love and affection that a dog has to give. So that's just a typical example of neuro-linguistics programming. And the language that I use in my brain in how I deal with this actually also adds to the way we reprogram ourselves. So neurolinguistics, a master practitioner in NLP, is when we bring the hypnotherapy side and we bring the very deep relaxation where we go into our subconscious brain, because the stuff that's lying here that we think every day is our conscious brain. It's 2% of our entire brain that we're using. The other 98% of all our memories, all of our belief systems, the way A plus B equals C runs in our brain is all sitting in our subconscious brain, in our subconscious mind. And we, as hypnotherapists, through language, through various techniques, delve into the brain to understand what are the root causes of why you're doing what you're doing, and how do we actually reprogram that to change it to more positive behavior, more positive thoughts, more positive ways of approaching life. So that's an NLP master practitioner.
That's beautiful. It's a very unique and very specialized skill set that you come with. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for clearing that up. Also, a very interesting thing about you that I've found, and it's wonderful to experience the universe and how it works when it brings people together. Is that you also a shaman, and along with the hypnotherapy, you also have the shaman side, and as well as normal secular knowledge of corporate and people and all of that. So what is it that Bodhi Max has to offer? Because that is basically a company that's built around you and your husband, and everything that you are as a couple, as people. So what is Bodhi Max about?
So what makes us specialized is that we bring in the psychology, the emotional, and the physiological aspect of healing through the NLP, the hypnotherapy. And then we look at the entire being from a soul and a spirit perspective. Because you are not just your mind and your body, you're also a soul. And this, I'm obviously talking to people who believe in souls and believe in higher consciousness. And it's not for everybody, but most religions do believe that you have a soul. So I'm just apologizing for anybody who does not believe in all of that. So for those people, we'll deal with the mental and the physical, and we've got no judgment around that. For those people that actually are into understanding I'm a physical and spiritual being, we realize that when you actually think about something like cancer, we know a lot of people now realize that stress can cause illnesses in your body, which is a psychosomatic condition. But at the same time, where we understand that your mental can affect your emotional and your physical, your mental, emotional, and physical can affect your soul. Your soul and what your soul comes with can affect your mental, emotional, and physical, and affect the spirit connection you have with God. So whenever we work with you, we don't look at just you as a physical material being here. We also look at you as a consciousness that is a soul. And if you are fixing something around, so say you're dealing with a problem around stress that is related to you losing somebody through COVID, we then look at what was that soul connection with that person that keeps you so steeped in that grief. What was that soul lesson that you needed to learn with that person that can help you to deal with the grief right now? And then how do we heal your soul and heal your emotional, mental, and physical to be able to move forward and release the grief and release the loss? So that's what makes us a bit different. We actually work on you on an energy, soul, consciousness, as well as an emotional, mental, and physical level.
Okay,
So,
it's so interesting that you mentioned COVID, because I think it's definitely changed so much, good and negative as well, or
yes.
less positive. Um, you've been following quite a lot of trends in the recent happenings, and I think you have a lot of insight to offer in terms of talking about COVID, and especially now with us getting into the third wave, there's a whole lot of things that are coming to the fore that I'm sure you're seeing on your front. Can you take us through some of those?
So let's, this is, the world started changing last year for us in about February, March. It started changing for the world in around October, November when COVID started coming in, right? Now, from an energy perspective, what this is actually doing is it's giving every jolt in the world. No longer can you sit on the fence and go, I'm doing the same behavior, it's not serving me, and I'm just going to carry on like this until I end up with an illness, and then it's going to make me wake up, or until my relationship breaks, and then it's going to make me wake up. COVID came in, and for all its negative aspects, it made us sit up and look at our lives. And if you haven't done that, it's about time that you do that, because we're now going into a third wave. It made us where we would go and distract ourselves. And I know that your next guest is talking about addictions, which is a distraction. It's a stress-induced distraction. We would get lost in the distraction of food or drugs or alcohol, or we'd become addicted to a social setting, or sugar or whatever, and we wouldn't deal with ourselves. And what COVID did when it came in is energetically it made us sit in our houses, and all we could do is deal with ourselves, deal with a relationship that we may have been ignoring that's unhealthy. And it was an awful way to do it, but it gave humanity a jolt. Now, the trend that's been happening is, one, it made us deal with ourselves when we've been evading ourselves. And it was actually an opportunity that's being created on an energetic level for us to choose better for our lives so that this world can change. Two, it actually then brought in, sorry, can I just close the door because I suddenly have a truck right outside my door. Okay, going. Part of life, right? Working from home. So two, what it did was it made us reevaluate where we're putting our energies in, what we're putting our energies into. So it made us reevaluate our jobs, the way we do our jobs, what we can offer into this world, because it put us into a stress response as to, will we be safe? So the first wave, everybody had to work from home, and it was a great thing. And everybody was like, yay, we don't have to go to the office. But they were scared about, getting infected and all of that. But then they realized, okay, if we all stay in our houses, the infection rate was a little bit slower, even though it was climbing and the world was getting used to it. And that was the first trend. But then the economy started to slump and people started to get stressed out about their jobs, right? By the time we got out of that first wave, the first thing I thought as Bodhi Max is, guys, we are not out of the woods. This is now affecting us on a global economic level. People are starting to go into the first wave of retrenchments. You need to understand, what are your other talents that you can offer into this world that you can start making money from? And that is the first thing I started teaching my clients. I said, come, let's do a personality test. Let's do your strengths and weaknesses. Let's look at what gifts and talents you have. Because that stupid gift that you thought you had, stupid, where you could make dream catchers, for instance, tomorrow might be the thing that's actually going to help you to make money in this global economic turn. Or where you thought that you were knitting like dog vests for your dog, that could become a business. So let's look at how we can actually do some business development. So there was a next trend. So before the second wave came, I told people, start to look inside of yourself. I know you're dealing with all the other stresses now of work, but should you get into any security and stability issues, start looking at what other things you can do. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Because what people did was they stressed themselves out by trying to keep their jobs. So they would sit in the office from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the night while trying to deal with children, a relationship, and having to deal with your husband that you only had to deal with, or wife that you only had to deal with for 2-3 hours a day because you were 8 hours at work. So now you're going to deal with them like for 12 hours a day. So it started to put pressure on us to explore more of ourselves and our talents and weaknesses and strengths. And then the second wave came. And this is where, Sanam, you saw people actually go more stressed out because it started taking down people quicker. That's where we as Bodhi Max actually got very busy dealing with people around grief and loss. Like people who would come to us with stories like, my sister went into the hospital in the morning by 2 o'clock. She did not come back. And then we started dealing with people on like dealing with them from a soul perspective of what does it mean to actually lose the soul connection that you have to your mother or your father, or having two friends die in 1 week, you know. But now it was, okay, aside from finances, career, relationships, it's how do I deal with this fear that this thing is coming back? And as much as I've learned coping mechanisms from the first one, I'm having the silent stressor in the background with my coping mechanism in the second one. And why we're sitting here is now we're going into a third wave. And those coping mechanisms, they may, they may still work, but we don't know what we don't know in this third wave. And we need to actually start going a little bit deeper into understanding that if we're dealing with more insomnia, with irritability, with forgetting things, with starting to like feel like you're lost somewhere, you feel sitting in the dark, it means that you have not changed something in your life. And you need to re-look at what is happening. And you're being put more in a position of saying, either I'm going to sink or I'm going to swim like a marathon, like a champion. And that's what these energies are starting to do. Aside from all the facts that, and some people believe in like astrological stuff. So from an astrology perspective, we've got like 3 or 4 Mercury retrogrades. We like in one now, you know, those things are also coming in. These things come in not to actually weaken us. It's to actually show us how we can face our greatest strengths. And that is what the trend is, how to keep on facing and finding our greatest strengths. And when you do that, I promise you, 10 years from now, when this world looks very different, you are actually going to be thriving no matter what comes your way, because the world has changed.
I think, it's so important that you bring in this aspect of evolution. I do see a very nice comment here from Sunil. Thanks so much for joining, Sunil G. People have had to find themselves beyond being known for what they do for a living. Some are still in denial. And I think, that point of evolution is so important because it makes us human to be adaptable. Things so far have changed so much. It's such a different way of thinking, a different way of life. There's solidarity in some parts, and there's an extreme break in others. And
Yeah.
it's so important to look into that because it's in adversity that you actually get to fine tune yourself. It's almost an opportunity for growth. Very often, like you mentioned earlier, where sometimes some things get stored in your subconscious, sort of in like an archive file, and then it takes maybe a little bit of stress or a little bit of trauma to bring that to the forefront so that you can deal with it in a healthy way and move forward, not move on, but resolve that and move forward. And with the third wave being here initially, just as lockdown began, what I found is, as a performing artist, professionally, I'm used to being in very social environments, being around a lot of people, constantly, going out and coming back and doing my admin during the day, and then in the evening I'm going out and performing. So it was a very busy lifestyle, a very social and active lifestyle. And the moment COVID hit and lockdown happened, I almost didn't know what to do with myself. And I think a lot of people struggled at that point as well, to say, okay, now what do we do? Do we go and become a social media influencer, or do I get onto another social media platform, maybe TikTok or other platforms like that? And people started venturing out. But also what I found was that a lot of people that have had previously looked at me sort of from an audience perspective on a stage, because that is my arena of performance, they now still looked at me and expected something to happen, but started to reach out in terms of loneliness, because a lot of people at that time felt very isolated. And some people may be living alone, or some people that don't have any kids, that are used to having active lifestyles like myself. I too felt that way, that I'm so isolated. Like, who am I? If I'm not an artist, what am I? Because that's the one thing I know. That's the one thing I do best in life, is to be an artist. And now that's being questioned. And, things like, what is my life purpose? And do I have, am I being constructive with myself, with my time and my energy? What do I do? Who am I? That was a question that was so prominent at that time. And now with the second wave, it opened up a little bit, and then the second wave, and you're like, okay, maybe something can happen. But then slowly you start to develop other means of finding who you are, in exploring yourself. And here we are at the third wave. And you mentioned, stuff like loneliness, loss, and grief. And I think now, after the second wave, we've seen so much of that it almost creates like a numbing effect, where you get
Yes.
so used to saying, oh, okay, my one aunt passed away, and unfortunately I cannot go for the funeral because it was COVID. And a week later, it's, oh, my cousin's husband passed away, and you're like, oh, it's sad, but what do you do? Because you're not in that environment to experience that. And I feel there's sort of like a little, sort of like a muted emotion that comes through with that. How would you suggest, or what light can you shine on that topic, in terms of becoming a little bit less human, less empathic, if I can say that?
Wow. Um, so the it's not about becoming less human, and it's not about becoming less empathic. What it is about acceptance. And what happens is, when we go into resistance, we're either going to fight something, and we're going to be like, okay, this has happened 10 times before. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to numb myself down. And all the while, the silent stress is happening on a physiological level, right? But mentally and emotionally, you've shut yourself down. Um, and when you resist, besides actually then ignoring it, the other thing we do is we get lost in it from an emotional perspective. So then we're like, oh my God, this is happening to me, and it's happening again, or it's happening to somebody else, and I can't believe, and why is this happening? And there's all those why questions, and you get lost in the emotion of it, right? And the thing is that part of you resisting is also because you don't have certainty and you don't have control over it. And every time this happens, we have two choices. One is that we ask ourselves, can we actually change this? Do we have control over this? So we don't. Okay, so say we don't have control over it, like we don't have control of what COVID's going to do. At the moment, though, are you safe? And if you don't have control, are you going to die in any way? You can only deal with this moment. And most likely the answer is you're safe at the moment, right? So if you're safe at the moment, then can I just pull myself back towards myself and in this moment accept that I am safe, that I am here, that whatever is happening out there is happening out there. I, as a person, knowing who I am, and if the who I am question leads to the fact that I am love, I am kindness, I am beauty, I am compassion, then can I tap into that compassion inside of me with a space of acceptance and hold a space of compassion for the rest of the world? I cannot change it, but I can actually hold love, compassion for the world. So then you're not less empathetic, you're not inhuman, but what you are doing is facing your fears, realizing you have a strength of love and compassion, and that you're accepting that this is just the way it is right now. It just is, for whatever divine reason the Lord has created it for. And I can just be here holding a space of love and compassion. If you can just take that deep breath and relax. So I have three things where you take a deep breath, you relax your body, so you release all the tension out of your body. You shimmy a bit like Beyonce, release all the tension, and then you ask yourself three questions. Who am I? Where am I? And what am I doing right now? So who am I? And the question, whatever that answer is for you, like generally my answer is, I am here, I am joy, I am light. Where am I? And I am this moment. I am here. I am in my house, which means I am safe and I am secure. And what am I doing right now? I am sitting with Sanam and I'm actually helping the world one person at a time. By the way, one of the biggest stress relievers is to actually go out there and make a difference. I was looking at, when you're helping somebody else, it's actually quite a stress relief because you actually feeling good about helping somebody else creates a release of dopamine. You're interacting with other people, so serotonin is released and you start to actually relieve stress responses. So I hope that answers. That's a long version of taking away being inhumane or being empathetic and just being in the here and the now with acceptance.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing to discuss. And I think the way you put it as well is so eloquently, covering it from so many different angles. So I think the next part of this discussion in terms of the different spin-offs in terms of mental health, and with everything else that's happening right now, everything that we've been discussing, what are some of the biggest mental health issues that you've seen come from?
So obviously it's the one that lots of people know, right? So we stress creates different mental health issues. So anxiety, so we start to worry, and worry is the mental part of anxiety, right? And when we stress is the physiological response to worry, right? So, sorry, is the physiological response to anxiety. And stress is not a bad thing because it actually helps us to cope with, to like deal with stuff very quickly. It's when you have prolonged stress that it becomes chronic stress. Because in nature, when your body goes into stress, you either have to fight or flight, and then you deal with whatever's going on in your environment. Then once you've dealt with it, you go back to grazing. The problem is today we don't go back to grazing. It's just continuous all the time. And our body is continually releasing adrenaline and cortisol and it's depleting itself. So what this leads to typically is generalized anxiety disorder. So because it's prolonged anxiety and it's deep and it creates panic attacks. People go into a deep sense of loneliness and despair. So people know loneliness, but they don't realize there's a despair that comes with it, as if like nothing that you do is actually going to make this change. That's a despair inside, like a helplessness. Then they go into a deep sense of loss and grief. Like a lot of people are feeling grief around losing people that they love, losing income, losing relationships. So grief is not only about losing somebody through death. Grief is also losing like material things that you're used to. And it's not actually, some people may think it sounds fickle, but it's not. Like if you have a relationship and you break up with that person, you're going to experience grief. If you lose a job that you really loved, you're going to experience grief and loss. And then you're going to feel a sense of worthlessness. So all of it goes back to self-esteem and self-worth. People have been suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, of which you really need to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. The other thing that people are starting to go into the extremes of is bipolar, very deep major depression. Major depression is a DSM diagnosis where you then have to be hospitalized. And I think a lot, very more so than all of these mental disorders is that people are actually experiencing a lot of physical illnesses. So a lot of cancer coming out, a lot of people suffering from like, where they feel like lots of headache, insomnia, feeling like body pains, like they get flu all the time. but and then they think they have COVID and it stresses them out, but they're constantly like creating flu and phlegm in their body. So, but I think cancer is a big thing that is coming out physiologically. And a lot of autoimmune diseases is also coming out quite prominently. So, as much as we're talking about mental health, obviously mental health then leads into the physiological part of your body. So, autoimmune diseases and a lot of cancer associated diseases coming out.
Mm. You know, it's important to draw that link between the two. You know, we mentioned earlier to try and make mental health awareness a little less daunting than most people would think. But you know, it is that aspect of being in sync with your mind, body, and soul. Because when there is that lack of synchronicity within you as an individual, everything else tends to fall like a domino effect. You know, there's an imbalance, and it's important, you know, from your soul will stem your emotions, and then that will trigger certain thoughts and certain mindsets and maybe even certain mental illnesses, and that will then start to manifest within your body, and you know, you can develop certain diseases or responses to those mental illnesses in a physical way, where, for example, somebody would be having a panic attack due to stress and anxiety of a certain situation, maybe a lack of control, or whatever it may be. But to link those is so important. And I see here, thank you so much, Sunil, for being so
I like what he said.
yeah, there's so many beautiful comments here. To everyone who's watching, if you can just read Sunil's comments, they really are very apt. Like the last one, he says here, the experience is often linked to attachment. And you know, going back to attachment, there is that belief system. There's a certain belief system that's usually comes with the concept of being attached to something. You mentioned now in terms of loss and grief. Uh, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has passed away in your life. You could sometimes even mourn the death of a certain lifestyle or a certain relationship, which still has all of those telling signs of grief and of mourning, and everything else that comes with it. You know, uh, however that may manifest within your body is still something you've got to look at, which is why, you know, dealing with this topic, which is definitely not spoken enough. Sunil, you're right, it's not spoken nearly as much as it should, because it's so important. You know, a lot of people have gone on to fitness and and said, you know, oh, you know, we're all about positivity. I'm all about positivity. We don't want any negative vibes. But very often there's a lot of so-called negativity that's attached to things like cancer and depression, and if there's any sort of like lack in self-esteem or loss of income, it's seemingly viewed as something that's less positive. Whereas when you break it down and you try and understand it on this level, and now I want to speak to the shaman in you, but
I know.
especially on attachment. That's where I'm going with this. Um, especially on that level, you know, on the spiritual realm, you have so much to offer there in terms of now attachment and this change in lifestyle, this duality between positive and negative, light and dark, and finding that yin yang, you know, that balance in it.
Yes, yes. So, you know, so the things around attachment, like for example, right? It is a very soul-based lesson. And
Mm.
and when you actually have something like let's take cancer, for example, right? Like you said, people would actually see it as a very negative thing, but on a very spiritual level, I'm going to go complete shaman on you now, right? So
Yes,
on a
do it.
very spiritual level, it is actually your soul that has decided that it is going to choose this experience of COVID, which all our souls chose, this experience of cancer, this experience of losing a certain job that you were very attached to, or a relationship that you were very attached to, for you to learn something that you have not learned before, for you to actually be able to grow in whatever the strength is that you need to grow in, to be able to strengthen that connection with God. So say, for example, cancer came into your life, and one of the things you needed to transcend is to not be a victim. So say your entire life you fell prey and victim to being a people pleaser, and all you did was let people walk all over you for most of your life for whatever reason. And we can go into what those reasons may be, right? But for whatever reason, you did that. And each time it made you sad and it made you depressed, but you didn't know any other way, and it caused diseases in your body. That is not necessarily, whilst it might feel like a negative thing that is happening, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's your soul saying, knock, knock. Nirvashni, what exactly are you doing? Because you're letting people walk all over you. Where is your personal power on your strength? Here, there's a cancer in your body that it is created. You need to pull yourself back into yourself. Look at where this is coming from. Deal with this thing and fix yourself mentally, emotionally, and behavioral wise, because the cancer is just a symptom for you to realize where you're giving your power away. And when you take back your power and say that power is to be, let's make it practical. Say that power is to actually be the person that actually it becomes a counselor within women who are suffering from breast cancer, for example, to empower and inspire women by virtue of the fact that you realized what your cancer was about. You transcended it as a champion, as a victor, moving from victim into victor. You got rid of all of those things in your life that actually pulled you down, that actually created the cancer in your life, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Um, and now you realize, standing in your strength, hey, I can actually be a healer to other people. You actually start fulfilling a soul purpose in your life by releasing those attachments, which means you grow your soul, you grow yourself personally and emotionally. And when you grow your soul and you actually pass it forward, your connection to God actually gets strengthened. You've released past karmic stuff that actually weighed you down previously because you released all of these things. If your soul was looking like this now, your soul is actually burning brighter to that level because the cancer came in as the greatest lesson that you had to have in your life, and you chose to see it as a lesson, not to actually shrink in the negativity of it. Does that make sense? So when we actually deal with people that come here with a cancer or an attachment that is weighing them down, we ask them, so let's look at what your soul is trying to teach you. What is the lesson here? And how do we actually change our emotions, our behavior, and our thinking to grasp that lesson, integrate that lesson, implement that lesson, and achieve our greatest potential as a soul?
Mm.
So that's what
Yes,
we.
okay. That's very interesting. I want to go back to this point of, and I think um, you know, so many of us on so many different levels in so many different ways. For the benefit of diversity, just to come back to the point that you made that, we choose this experience. I've heard that particular if I can say that phrase previously in a few different other platforms and walks of life, and it's something that I want to just look into a little bit. Some people say, what do you mean I did not choose to be experiencing the suffering that I am experiencing now? I didn't This is not a conscious thing. Why would I choose to suffer, or why would I choose to be born in a particular setting of, whether it is financially or relationship wise, or maybe even illness. Not everybody is blessed with good health. Sometimes you just experience things that are karmic. There
Yeah.
may never be a solution to it, medically at least. So what is it exactly when you say we choose this experience that we're having? What does that boil down to?
So I'm gonna break it down to its absolute. So take away like all the other belief systems around it and all of that, right? Let's make it very practical. So we've come here, and for whatever reason, we ended up with, say, as a child, an autoimmune disease, right? And then for a while, our parents protect us, they teach us, they help us to heal and all of that. Up until a point, and I'm just going to keep it very psychological based now. up until a point where you can actually start making decisions for yourself, right? Now, they always say that choice is the greatest thing that we have. And say your autoimmune disease is continuing. We, in that very moment of that autoimmune disease continuing, we choose in that moment how we want to actually deal with that. So are we going to actually succumb to it and be completely weakened by it? Or in that moment or in the moments that we have, are we going to choose to say, okay, cool, I'm going to either seek out a counselor or create a support system for myself? I'm using like really, practical examples. Or I'm going to today take the time to actually just rest, because as much as I have this disease and I have a deliverable at work, I'm choosing to rest today because I'm honoring my body today. So in every moment, and then the moment we choose to not pay attention and make the best choices for ourselves is when we're making that disease worse. And then 5 years from now, when we haven't made the best choices for ourselves in every moment and that disease has gotten worse, and we ask ourselves, but I never chose this. 5 years ago, you had choices to actually take that day off to look after your body. Very practical example, right? And I'm sure people can bring in their things, their stuff where they say, okay, but no, this, whatever. And we can obviously deal with lots of those and we can work through it. But if the principle is that every choice that we make that is in the highest alignment for ourselves is the responsibility that we have to us in this moment, and they all add up. And every time we make the choices that are not for the highest good of our bodies, for something like an illness, when 5 years from now we say, but we never asked for this, when we actually as therapists go back and look at the past of the person, it's every time it's that they succumb to the pressures rather than took their power back to say, what is good for me right now? That's just a typical example. Because we think about it on a very surface level. Oh no, we didn't choose this thing just happened to us. But then when we go to a deeper level, we realize on a very, very subtle level, we've actually made choices in our life that could have actually contributed towards us, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. I hear what you're saying that, sometimes I think many people would even argue with that. It's almost like a controversial statement, this
It's a very
this
controversial.
element of choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
this element of choice that, oh no, I don't choose this. What do you mean? Certain mental illnesses don't stem from choice. Uh, for example, a lot of people will say anxiety. Let's just take a simple, easy one that I think a lot of people can relate to and understand is that, anxiety, yes, you can definitely have this thing of choice, not choosing yourself when you've needed to, and then having to bear the trauma of it manifest in different ways, maybe physically or in whichever way, emotionally even. But then you get, more complicated diseases and things like bipolar and schizophrenia and stuff like that. And I think, look, I'm not qualified to speak on it as a professional. Anybody who's watching, please forgive me if I maybe step on toes. That's not the intention, but it's to learn, And I think when it comes to those diseases, there's still a lot of misunderstanding um, in terms of personal choice and not looking at a superficial level, looking at the deeper meaning or maybe the roots of where it is coming from. From your background, how do you look at those kinds of mental illnesses?
The first thing we do is that, we don't negate the fact that that somebody can be born with a genetically predisposed disease. We're not those people. And I do not deny allopathic medicine either, because I believe everything in this world has its place in this world. So by no means are we the kind of healers that are fanatical about anything, because I really do believe everything does have both my husband and I has its place. So when somebody comes in, we never negate the fact that, say, for example, there was a genetic disease that, like schizophrenia, for example. Sometimes, there is mental diseases that runs in the family and it gets picked up genetically, right? More often than not, things like bipolar and schizophrenia, we find that when you go back into childhood, it is an emotional and mental response to a situation. I'm saying more often than not. Um, but never negate that could have been born with a neurological problem that has created it. So when we actually deal with it, the first thing we do is that we look at it at a holistic level. Physiologically, what was your family's history? Because we get people to actually fill out a client intake form. Um, then we go into what was your history as a child. There are studies that have shown that you get programmed as a child, already taking in information and creating like reasoning and logic and programs and belief systems inside of yourself. From 3 months in the womb to already by the time you're 7 years old, you already have formed a judgment of the way the world works and how you're going to operate in it. So there are studies that have shown that, right? So we look at you going back into your childhood to see what happened in your childhood. Was there abuse, for example? Was there some sort of traumatic event? Sometimes it's as simple as your parent telling you they came home from a bad day of work and you spent like the entire day doing something to please them, like making a piece of art or a card for your mommy or whatever, and they had such a bad day and you're like 5 years old and you're so proud and you love your mother and they are like your hero, and you come and you come and pull her while she's trying to make food for you, and then she goes, can you never leave me alone? You are such an irritation in my life. And you cower back. I promise you, to a 5-year old, that is so devastating that it can cause such problems later on in your life. So some people think it's always a big trauma. Sometimes it's not a big trauma. Sometimes it's one or two or three little things that actually add up. And then it's caused certain behaviors in your life. So we go back into your history. And then we go back into, if you believe it and if you want to go there, into soul experiences. And we look at how your body is responding to these things. We look at the choices that you've been making for yourself each and every time, and what are the fears that have been pulling you back to make a choice that is limiting you rather than enhancing you. So we deal with your fears that have come in. And then we look at all of these things and we make sense of it with you, casting a light. And then we get you to actually choose what is the best thing that is for you. Because I can't tell you what is the best thing for you. You're the expert of your life. You've lived your life. We're just here to cast the light, to be the guide. Because I believe you're actually your own greatest healer, to be quite honest. I would never disempower you by making you think that you cannot heal yourself or you cannot actually live a better life than you're living right now. We're all about empowerment, right? So I'd rather look at you knowing that you're your own greatest healer and that you have all of the answers inside of you, even though at this moment you may think you don't. So that's how we deal with it.
Okay. Wow, it's so deep and insightful, really just having this conversation, I feel is so it's a wonderful journey, just even so far.
Yeah.
Going further than that, there's obviously that aspect of knowing and understanding or accepting. But what are some of the telltale signs of us not necessarily self-diagnosing, because I think that also has an element of danger to it
Yes.
sometimes. But rather looking out for certain things maybe within ourselves as responses to different, if you want to call it diseases that may be coming forth, that we maybe are ignoring because we may be not used to the concept of, let's say, therapy or hypnosis or things like that. What can you advise people who are watching, to look out for?
Okay, cool. That's a good question, actually. So if you find yourself, so telltale signs that you're starting to actually go into I call it dis-ease,
Mm,
dis-ease in your body is Obviously, a very big one is not being able to sleep at night chronically, right? Sometimes you may think it's insomnia, it can also be depression. When you're waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning consistently, can actually be a psychological disease that's coming in, like a psychological problem that you're suffering from, especially if it's when you see consistency in something, you have to go get your body checked out. Chronic muscle pain. Um, when you feel like so for women, like from a womb perspective, if there's pain in there, if it's irregular periods that you're getting, if for example you're feeling like uncomfortable when you're having intimacy and sexual intercourse, we think we sort of wave it off because, oh, it's happened before and maybe I'm stressed
Mm.
out. But if it's continuing all the time, you need to go check it out, right? You might get like irritations in your skin. So irritations in your skin can also mean that there's something going on in one of the organs in your body. And if it's constant, it is a stress response to something. Go and get it checked out. Constant headaches. You know how often people get constant headaches and they're like, "Oh, I'll just pop a Miprodol and then it's fine." But what is
Yeah.
actually happening in your body for you to have constant headaches? If you've constantly got phlegm in your throat, is there a thyroid issue?
Mm.
Always do your breast examination. Sometimes we think, oh, your mammary glands are just generally painful. But, if you can feel it's painful all the time, we think, okay, fine, we'll just go do this one thing and we don't have to deal with it. Because sometimes we're
Mm.
scared to find out as well, right? The times, the other thing is that the other thing to look out for is, say for instance, and your other guest is dealing with addictions. So say for instance you're not feeling well and every time you're not feeling well you go and, oh, I'm going to have some alcohol today to just relax, and then the next morning you wake up feeling really shitty. And
Mm.
if every time that you do that, it's a momentary thing that makes you feel better, and then the next moment you're feeling shitty, you should go get yourself checked out, because that little plug-in that you're putting that can become an addiction can be something greater that's happening in your body. But if, for instance, you're making a better choice for your life, so say, for instance, to make yourself better, you're going hiking, and then the next day you actually feel really great about yourself, then it was just a stress that you're actually dealing with, and that the better choice made you feel better. Um, the other thing is, if you're avoiding the world all the time and you're getting lost in like fear and anxiety and reading conspiracy theories and the world is out to get you and why must we accept a WhatsApp thing because now they're going to follow us. When you get into that fear and anxiety where you feel like you need to run away from the world, and it's starting to affect you in your body where you're like constantly like, your spine feels tense, everything feels tense and all of that, go get yourself checked out both mentally and physically, because that running theme in your life is actually going to end up in further illnesses because you're actually escaping like
Mm.
fears that you're not facing.
Mm.
Generally fear is what causes diseases in your body.
Yeah, and it's so important. I know you'll understand this now from the shamanic side of things, and you know your all of your chakras need to be balanced, and each one of them is associated with the region within
Yes.
where it's placed, and from
Yes.
there you'll find different emotions that will get maybe captured if it's linked to a particular chakra, and then will start manifesting in organs related to that chakra. And it's a concept that I think, in today's day and age, the wonderful thing of this age of technology and even of COVID and lockdown is that we've always had so much of information available to us, at our fingertips, via the internet, via our devices, and we've had that there. But now we've started to actually really fully make use of it. I think there's an age of enlightenment that's happening. There was the age of enlightenment, and now there's a new one, a new age of enlightenment, where people are a lot more aware of things like yoga and chakras, and finding that balance between the energies within you. And I think in terms of this, on a chakra level, because you speak of how these different emotions, because that is where it ultimately stems from, you having a fear, for example, can manifest itself in so many different mental illnesses and mental diseases, and then even physically, it can show up that way. So you have this side of things, which is the chakra side, right? It's spiritually, and finding that inner balance on the inside. As a shaman, how do you work through things like that?
So we use I'm actually running a women's group at the moment where we're actually looking through each of the chakras, working through each of the chakras, where we're tapping into those chakras and looking at belief systems we have in there that limit us from actually moving into creating abundance, right? And I'm doing it tonight at 7 o'clock, where we're dealing with the sixth chakra. And everybody thought they're coming to work with their abundance model when they tapped the chakra. And I told them, listen, guys, it's actually going to open up a whole lot of things with regards to more than just abundance. It's going to be relationships. It's going to be the way you actually do your life, how you feel, your heart, your emotions. So as shamans, what we do is we look through the fears that reside in each of your chakras, and I utilize the Kabbalistic tree, which is in Judaism, which is the tree of life, and I look at the chakra and I overlay the two of them on it to look at what does this mean for us from a fear-based energy level. And I utilize a lady named Caroline Mice, where she goes very deeply into the chakras around like mental, emotional, and physiological energies that are sitting there in belief systems. So for example, if you're actually like, if you're suffering from an attachment to a family member and it's a very toxic relationship, and you find that what you're scared to actually release that family member because they're creating a whole lot of toxicity in your emotions, your body, you're getting sick and all of that. We go first into your first chakra. Your first chakra, the actual soul lesson is about oneness. The fear is about tribal and survival issues. And your first tribe is your family. So your fear around releasing a family member may be first chakra stuff that's actually sitting in you that says, I have to follow the rules and the traditions of my family, because if I don't, then I do not belong. I am not loved. Therefore, I will continue with this toxic relationship. Does that make sense? So we work with that fear in the first chakra. And then if, for example, what's happening is that you're becoming angry and you're becoming this dominant person because of that particular thing, then we move into the second chakra. And its second chakra is about fears of relationships around money, sexuality, and the whole thing around there. The soul lesson is honoring one another. So because of you having that fear in your first chakra, it's bringing up this behavior in your second chakra that says you're not honoring everybody around you because of that fear. So then we deal with that. And then what happens is you now move, because of that problem, into being the victim. And then you become the people pleaser because you're too afraid now that person is going to leave you and you're going to be kicked out of the tribe. And we go into your third chakra. And your third chakra is the fear of not honoring, not the fear of responsibility. So not honoring your own power. So not honoring, say, it's your solar plexus, your power center. So then we look at how are you honoring yourself. And so we move up. How are you closing your heart in this? Because then it's about loving one another, and that's what comes up there. How are you actually trying to institute control? Because then you're not expressing your authentic self from your throat chakra. And how is that relating to that particular problem? If we go up to the sixth chakra, what are you not seeing in this particular circumstance where you're holding on to your belief systems around this, instead of opening up your third eye, opening yourself up to what is actually happening, and then saying, okay, cool, let me actually be courageous enough to see what is actually happening in the circumstance, to me, to the situation, and to the people. And then from the fifth chakra, it's about how do I bring in that information from my soul to tell me what is going on here and what's the soul lesson. And we look at what's stuck in here. What are the fears from closing yourself off, from moving forward, taking back your power and enhancing your soul. So that's how we work through the whole chakra system. That is why I say we're holistic. We're not, we don't only look at
Absolutely.
just chakras.
Yeah, no, it's so wonderful, and it's such a beautiful and deep explanation, to everybody who's watching. If please, please, please give Bodhi Max a follow. I can guarantee you will be missing out if you don't. But also, a step further than that is to actually make that contact. If you feel that you relate to anything that we've spoken about so far, please, please, for yourself, do this. It will benefit you. I know I so far have been so grateful to have found some of the wonderful ladies that I've met very, very recently, including you and all of the other ladies that were involved in bringing me to this wonderful interaction. I really am grateful so much to you. It's been such a wonderful discussion, and I feel like, okay, we've been speaking for roughly an hour, and I just feel like we can go on and on talking about
Good.
so many different things. But I do hope that this was beneficial to everyone who's watching. I know for me, I've learned so much, and thank you so much for being here. But before we say goodbye to you, is there anything that you would like to leave us with, whether it is about you or anything that you're working on that people would be interested in? Just some
Yes.
parting thoughts.
So some parting thoughts is, a big thing is having the attitude of gratitude. So when you're feeling like you're really deep in some sort of despair, reach out, look at the things that you can be grateful for, and reach out to people, reach out to hug a friend, phone a friend, dance, watch a funny movie, do things that can actually embrace the lighter side of life. Make an effort to do that. So, if you think, okay, life is getting too much and the last time you had sex was like 1 month ago, make a bloody effort to actually just be with your partner, like do frivolous things, to actually just get the dopamine and the serotonin. Sometimes we think it's these hectic things that we need to do. It can be very simple. My other motto is simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Please also reach out to a therapist. You do not understand how important it is to actually talk to somebody that is objective these days. And also know if God brought you to it, He would never bring you to it if you cannot deal with it. So having somebody help you through the fact that you actually have the strength to deal with this is an important thing. He will never take you to something that you cannot deal with. And then my last parting shots is that, hypnotherapy is one of the greatest things that you can actually have from a mainstream perspective in terms of getting to the root of things. And it cuts out all this conscious shenanigans that you have going on, the hamster wheel that you have going on. So have a look at Bodhi Max and some of the stuff that we've actually put on Instagram and on Facebook. I've decided to spend this, I started last year, this year actually doing as much pro bono and help work as possible where I'm needed because it's required. Our new motto is creation and collaboration over competition. This is what's going to actually help us to actually get through these times. And then for people who want to grow their abundance thinking, get rid of their blockages, I'm going to go run the second group of people to deal with all the blockages and limiting beliefs they have in their chakras. So if you are interested in it, just pop me a message either on Facebook, Bodymax, or on Instagram, and we start a group and we start tapping through those things. So I use EFT, I use hypnotherapy and the chakra system to actually start unblocking your abundance vows and belief systems for you to start actually then, embracing more of your own power. So you can let me know about that. Right.
Wonderful. So there you have it, everybody. I think it's something that you can only win from. You can only benefit from being in touch with Nirvashni and with Bodhi Max itself. So Nirvashni, once again, thank you so, so much for spending this time with me. I so much appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. It's been so informative and so wonderful to meet you. Thank
And
you
thank
so,
you.
so much. And I hope to have you back on the show as soon as I
I
can.
Yeah, I'm here to actually just help whenever I can. That has been my commitment for the year. So if I can touch one soul, I don't care who comes on, then that's enough. We've done something good for the day. All
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you
right.
so much for being
Well,
here, and you have a wonderful evening.
cool. You too. And I hope you enjoy the next guest. Guys, stay on. Since
No,
I'm,
definitely.
yeah. Okay.
Thanks so
Cool.
much, Nirvashni. Bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so that was our wonderful, wonderful guest. And please don't leave. To everybody who's here, please continue. We're not done with the segment. There is another portion of the segment, and I think it's a very real and very practical example of everything that we've been speaking about so far. So I'm going to introduce my next artist. I keep on saying my next artist. I'm so used to having my creatives here. So I have the next guest, which is Mr. Mahesh Magan. Now, Mahesh Magan, he has a very interesting story, and the reason why I'm so excited to have him, we've been friends for a long time. We've actually known each other from a different social media platform, and the interesting thing, just a little bit of background in terms of my friendship with him is that we've never actually met in real life. We've never met. We've never really interacted in any way outside of social media, outside of just telephone communication. But we've established such a wonderful and true friendship, and I think it is that soul connection that makes life so much more meaningful. When you meet these people on in various ways, and you are able to recognize that this is an old friend. So I'm going to bring on Mahesh. He is a recovering addict and also a mentor and big brother of the Breaking the Chains Rehabilitation Center based in Johannesburg. So I'm going to add him to the live now. And what we're going to do is just get to know a little bit of his story, his journey through his addiction and recovery, and a little bit more about the center and what the center itself has to offer. Hi, Mahesh. How are you?
Well, and you, how are you?
I am I'm very good. As you saw, we had such a wonderful segment with Nirvashni. She was wonderful, and thank you so much for being here. I must apologize firstly because we did go much over our time that we had expected, but I think it was very well worth it.
That's all good.
So,
We're glad
Mahesh,
to be here.
I'm going to throw you to the forefront now and give you the space to introduce yourself.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you for having me on the show. Um, my name is Mahesh. I am a recovering addict and alcoholic. I've been in recovery now for exactly 2 years and 6 months today. And it's really profound that we can actually have this conversation on a landmark where I actually celebrate for myself. And why I call it a landmark is because one day in recovery for an addict is like a miracle, first and foremost. You know, there's been so much that's happening in my life recently when it comes to my past experiences, dealing with my recovery, dealing with life and life's terms. It hasn't been easy, but the way I see it, everything happened in God's will by mistake. Or nothing happens in God's will by mistake first.
Mhm.
So, a little bit of my background. I became an addict at the age of 21 already. I've been in active addiction for about plus minus 7 years. Um, through all that, I actually left home at a very young age. I left home at the age of 17, but that was due to unforeseen circumstances. Um, the reason, or one of the main reasons why I actually ended up in active addiction is because through my entire childhood, for about plus minus 10 years, I went through a lot of mental and physical abuse. And when I left home, obviously at a young age, you exposed to the harsh realities of life, to the real world, and not knowing how to deal with it. Obviously, um, I had to become an adult at that age and live my life already. So not knowing what life would be and how life would be out there, and because of my past history with abuse and so forth, I ended up into active addiction, or should I say, drinking and drugging, not just drugs or not just alcohol. It was drugs and alcohol, and it wasn't something that was easy. And I'll tell you why. Because while in active addiction, you know, a lot of people will look at you and they would say, but he comes from a good home. How did he end up like this? But they don't actually know the underlying issues of what actually happened in the course of that period and why people actually turn to drugs and to alcohol first and foremost. Now, a lot of people ask me, was it because of peer pressure, or was it because of hanging with the wrong friends, or was it because you were too outgoing? And it's none of those things. For me personally, I ended up picking up a drug because of my own choices. So no one actually told me, do you want to try it, or would you like to try it? I went on my own and said, you know what, I'm going to try it. And that's how I ended up into addiction. Now, addiction is not an overnight thing. It's a process. So what tends to happen is that you start off maybe on a monthly thing, like maybe once a month. And then from once a month, it moves to every single weekend. And from every single weekend, it moves to then a daily process. And what tends to happen is that your body enjoys the feeling that the drugs actually give you. And that's what the addiction is about. And that's what I'm going to actually touch on. So what happened with me is that drugs actually gave me a false sense of happiness and took away all the pain and suffering that I was actually going through. So the pain of being alone, the pain of not knowing if my family is okay. So all those things, the drugs took away those feelings. Not realizing that I'm adding on to more of my problems that I already have. So what drugs does is that you end up with a lot more problems than what you actually should be having. And all we do is that we just use any sort of substance, whether it be alcohol or whatever sort of drug or drug of choice a person is on, would take that specific drug and would say, right, I'm going to use this drug because it makes me feel more energetic, or I can speak better to people. Because a lot of people use drugs so they can actually get the false sense of confidence to actually speak to other people. That's one of the reasons a lot of people actually use drugs, not knowing that in the long term, your body will actually become dependent on the drug. And when I came into recovery, I didn't realize that, the drugs had taken such a dangerous course in my life, where it didn't just affect me or damage me. It affected my family. It affected my life, the way I loved life, the way I done things. And I was a person that I was very against drugs at a young age, not realizing that I'm going to be one of those people that's going to fall into active addiction. Now, drugs is something that's very serious. So no matter what age, what race, what creed, what sexual identity you are, no matter who you are, the type of person you are, if you end up taking a drug and you get hooked, then there's in the world of, we call it Narcotics Anonymous, which is a fellowship that we have where there's recovering addicts and alcoholics. There's a vast platform of whether there's whites, Indians, blacks, coloreds, it doesn't matter. But it's male, female. There's a lot of female people in our fellowship as well. So it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. And I found recovery one of the most best things that I could have ever or possibly find. And I say this with the utmost humility. I don't regret taking my first drug. I don't regret ending up as a drug addict. I don't regret anything I've done in my past. Because whatever I've done in my past just made me stronger and made me a better person to who I am today. And the program of Narcotics Anonymous is a very simple program. Very, very simple. What it actually does is it reteaches you everything that a parent would teach you all from a young age. So how to respect people, how to love people, how to be understanding, how to have empathy towards people. And that's what we have to do. So there's a lot of lack in self-love with addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
Mahesh,
people that...
I think the one thing, like you mentioned now with this program, is that it sort of reparents you in a sense, and that is very much linked to, you know, the way I've introduced you, as you're sort of like a big brother, you know, in the center. And firstly, you know, I didn't actually know that today was your anniversary, so congratulations first and foremost.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you here on such a special day. And you know, everything that you've said so far, just linking back to our discussion with Nirvashni, is that it becomes an unhealthy coping mechanism, you know, an escapism to something else that you're experiencing in life, in your circumstances, or may not be able to control or to manage in a healthy, constructive way. And then here you find this dependency on different substances or different behaviors, because even, you know, obsessive compulsive disorders as well can stem from things like that as a coping mechanism, an unhealthy coping mechanism that can, you know, have many other different spin-offs. So here, as you're speaking about, you know, your journey through, as you came, you know, you confronted your addiction, and that whole journey and process through the whole thing, it's such a sensitive topic. It's very much sensitive, but so much important. And firstly, you know, I must congratulate you because it is your anniversary, but also because it's so inspiring. You know, there's so many people out there, people, I'll use myself as an example, and maybe my family or my background, that don't get to know firsthand what it is like to have somebody who's maybe an addict of some substance or nature, or to even experience it secondhand. So there's all of these misconceptions and all of these stigmas that are attached to it, and these stereotypes, and it's not often that people who have been through that journey, who have seen it firsthand or even secondhand for themselves, that come forth and actually have this discussion, you know. So it takes so much of strength from you to do this, because it really is, you know, it's not us reaching out to you, it's more you reaching out to people like me to clear these misconceptions and to educate us. So thank you so much for doing this, because I know we've spoken about it previously and we didn't actually get a chance before today to do it. But like you said, everything happens for a reason. And here we are today for this reason on this special day. So that's wonderful. Coming back to you as, you know, this role that you're playing as a big brother, as sort of like a family member through this journey for other people that have maybe been through similar journeys to yours. Take us through this recovery program. And, you know, you've mentioned that it's very simple and it basically reparents you, but elaborate a little bit more on that point, if you can, please.
Okay, not a problem. So we've got something what's called 12 steps of recovery. So the most important thing to remember is that when you come into the rooms of recovery, the very first thing that you're going to have to do is what's called a life story. So you start your life story from as far back as you can remember till the day you came obviously into rehab. That's the first and the most important step, because it will show you where all your flaws, where you actually went off track in life. And then once that is done, the very first step speaks about powerlessness and unmanageability. So the powerlessness, where you became powerless over your addiction and how your life had become unmanageable. That's the first part. And the second part, obviously, we teach you on how to find the God of your understanding again. So obviously, because there's different religions involved, so we tell you the God of your understanding, or how you actually understand God. So we introduce God to you into your life all over again. And then the third step after that is where you actually start, or you actually have built faith into God and start leaving things into God's hands. And then the step after that, which is the step 4, what we do is, it's called a searching and moral inventory of yourself. So that is where you do an inventory of yourself, whereby deal with topics of relationships, resentment, secrets, assets, um, finance, romance, stuff like that. And once you actually find all those problems, we move to step 5, which step 5 obviously is admitting your wrongs to another human being as well as to yourself. After that, we move to what's calling making a list of people that you had harmed in your life. So in an addict's life, what tends to happen is that they end up hurting 15 or more people while in active addiction. So obviously, you're going to have to make some sort of amends to those people. And then after that, the very next step after that is where you actually go and you make physical amends. So you approach the and then you obviously apologize for your wrongs. And then after that, what we do is, it's called a step 10, is where we do a daily inventory. So the daily inventory is where you look at your day and you ask yourself, okay, I've done A, B, and C. How do I actually better myself to become a better version of myself from what I was yesterday? Straight after that, so that is a daily inventory. So that needs to be done on a daily basis. And then straight after that, we've got a step 12, is where you obviously now try and help people. You obviously have the conscious contact with the God of your understanding. And like what I do in the centers, and how I try and help others, you sit with other people and you try and help them to the best of your ability. So what happens is, most of the guys' stories are similar when it comes to being in active addiction and what they've done during the active addiction. And then the 5 most important things that we do is God, service, step work, sponsor, and meetings. So we do meetings every single day. So what we normally tell the guys that are in the centers is that, even though after you finish your 3 months in the center, you have to do at least between 3 and 4 meetings a week, just so you can secure yourself in your recovery, just so you can make yourself stronger, obviously. And then after that, they do a self-care program where you actually do things on the outside.
Okay, it's so interesting everything that you're saying now, because and I know you would have obviously watched the previous segment as well, where we spoke about all of these different things like acceptance and gratitude and recovery and healing. And then, eventually you end up at a point where you need to pay it forward and give back as well. And here we find the same pattern of things coming forth, and it's so important, and it's actually such a wonderful journey. um, going beyond that, there's the recovery and all of the hardships that you would go through, with that. Like you've Sorry, I think there's just a bit of a break in connection.
Okay,
Mahesh,
so
are you there?
hello, hello, I'm here.
Hi. Okay, you're back. Okay. Sorry, it just seemed like it was loading for some reason. Okay, so back to what I was saying, there is this whole journey that you would go through. And then there is the tail end. So once you come out on the other side of your recovery and your rehabilitation, now you're at a point where you're doing the recovery independently, and it's now your responsibility solely as the recovered addict, or anything like that, outside of the rehabilitation center. I wouldn't I wouldn't expect life to go back to how it was before the addiction. And can you tell us what happens at that point? Because that is almost like a turning point where you've come back as sort of like a new person. You've started the addiction, went through that journey of addiction, recovery, and then what happens? What is life after recovery?
Well,
Mahesh, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure what has happened there. Um, Let me just try and get Mahesh back on the line. Okay, I'm not sure what has happened, but we have lost the connection with Mahesh. Um, let's just wait a couple of minutes to see if we can get him back on the line. Thank you so much again for being here and being so patient and so participation inclined uh, for today's episode. It's really been wonderful. It's been a wonderful, informative journey for me. I hope it's been that way for you as well. Please do, if you're not following us, if you're not following Chit Chat with Sanam, please give us a follow so that you'll always receive updates whenever we're doing any of our episodes in future. As well as our guests for today, Bodhi Max, as well as Mahesh Magan. They both have very, very inspiring stories and are doing lots of good work in society, in the community, just in general in the world. So please do give them a follow as well. It's really been a wonderful episode, I think, so far. Oh gosh, all sorts of things are happening. So I'm going to end this live and start another one. Hopefully, I will get Mahesh back on the line.